artists, I think, don't have a healthy relationship with money a lot of the time. I've seen artists push money away, or not want to think about money, or not want to deal with money, or not want to, they feel embarrassed by money. They feel embarrassed about asking for more when they're negotiating for something. They push it away. And and I think I think for artists to know what they're worth and to know that the reason they don't have that feeling of worth is just because of how this ad model has trained them, how these platforms have trained them. That when you open up your YouTube app and you see, you know, all the impact you're having, and then right below it you see your ad revenue of $85. If you've been trained on that over and over, every time you open up that YouTube app, suddenly, or not so suddenly, 5 years in, you start thinking, I guess I'm just not worth that much. But we think artists, and I believe artists, are incredibly impactful and should be treated as legitimate, viable contributors to the workforce. They're people who are generating impact and reaching millions with their work. And the key with changing the relationship with your fans is we give artists the relationship to have with their customers. So with their fans, like, you get the email addresses of your fans. If you want to reach your fans, you can send them a post, and we'll send your post to all of your fans. There's no holding back. There's no algorithm that says, oh, okay, we're only going to post to 2% of your fans or 1% of your fans. We give artists the control to reach 100% of their audience 100% of the time. That's really important. What other small business on the planet gets separated from their customers, gets separated from their fans? That's not fair. It's not fair to artists. Artists deserve, they're contributors to the workforce. They're legitimate small businesses. They're members of society that are having impact. They ought to be able to have a relationship with their customers like any other small business on the planet.
Yeah, yeah. Wow.
Well, you make a strong, strong case, I must say. I must say. I was thinking of some of the great artists who just died broke of the Ten Commandments financially. You know, Rembrandt selling all of his paintings at the end, Zora Neale Hurston, unmarked grave in Florida. You're absolutely right about artists having a sense of calling that oftentimes has little to do with the cash, the flow of cash in their direction. But let's look at this in a Socratic way too. The gains of the Patreon model, that which I think are immense, and you just laid out a few. I know you can go on and on. What would be some of the losses, though, brother, as an artist makes the shift from the older model that's fading to this new model? Because it seems to me every model's got certain gains and losses, as Jane has faced. It's up and down. How would you characterize the other side of it, the underside, as it were?
Yeah, so we're on the tightrope here. So let's do it. Let's do it
together. We're on it together, so you're not gonna fall. You're not gonna fall now. Don't worry about that.
I'm gonna give you the real stuff here. I'm gonna give you the stuff from Jack as artist, not Jack as CEO. So look, I'll offer this. There's two things. First, there's something beautiful about saying what's in your heart without outside influence. Outside influence of politicians, outside influence of brands, outside influence of fans. There's something beautiful about saying what's in your heart and ignoring the world around us, right? Because often we know, we have a sense. And when you develop that strength of relationship with your fans, there's a temptation to serve your fans and to treat your fans as customers and to build for your fans and to direct and change what's in your heart. And Patreon doesn't solve that problem. Now, that problem exists with CD sales, and it exists with as soon as you weave economics and art together, there are market forces that an artist has to be aware of as they say what's in their heart. And Patreon does not solve that problem, right? Because you get closer to your fans. Now, Some artists love that. Some artists are resilient and they resist the temptation. Some artists are fine, just being more
Accommodating.
but it doesn't. I think that's an important thing to be aware of as we're talking about the trade-offs of any system that we build. We have to have an honest conversation about those trade-offs, and I think that's a real trade-off.
But you said there were two. That was one.
Okay.
Don't fool around now. He will. He's listening. I forgot. I got so into one, I forgot all about number two.
Oh no, he's so powerful and candid and honest. He laid out that number one.
All right, I'll give you another one. And actually, I think Patreon does a good job of this, but it doesn't solve it. We do a good job. We don't solve it. It's supply and demand. There are wonderful things about that. There are difficult things about that create problems. And if you're a super popular artist, you get paid more on Patreon. And there are great things about that. There are wonderful effects that emerge from that ecosystem, and there are difficulties with that. And you know, Patreon's system does not solve you know, some of that disparity. And I think that's worth calling out too. Now, I'm not saying that it shouldn't exist because of that. I'm just trying to have an honest conversation. I'm trying
Absolutely.
Right. No, there's no context that's going to be perfect.
Exactly.
Even if it's all face-to-face, live performance, social structures are going to, you know, encourage people to reject certain artists because they're challenging things people may not be ready to hear. So there's always going to be, you know, a downside. But so are you imagining that Patreon basically in that way mirrors a little bit of the larger industry system? That is to say, those who get the most sales, just to use an old school model, are the ones who get the most power and the most influence and the most resources. And you're just saying that basic relationship is not fully disrupted at Patreon.
Yes, it's not fully disrupted. It is disrupted, but it's not solved. And here's what I mean by that. There's two things. The first is this quote unquote long tail gets a lot taller and a lot longer. So more money, more power, more influence flows into what was previously considered the disempowered, right? And that's a beautiful thing. So some artists who were making $85 a month in ad revenue are now making enough money to quit their job and be full-time artists. And that is better than what it was before. Now, I'd love it if they were making even more than they're making. And we're constantly, you know, the whole team is constantly trying to help artists get paid more and more. And I guess here's a way that I like to think about it. You know, so we're all standing on the shoulders of giants, right? We're all trying to incrementally improve our systems around us. And I think Patreon is a net positive, a significantly net positive incremental improvement in the systems of flow of capital and artistry. And so, yeah, I guess I want to be honest about the trade-offs. And I deeply believe that it is a really important system to make the world of professional artistry substantially better.